What's good? It's Woog. So David Benavidez versus Caleb Plant is now official. I feel like there are varying degrees of how official a fight is, right? First, you start seeing language in the articles or in the reports that say like such and such a fight is targeted, and then you see it's being finalized. And around that time, sometimes before, sometimes after, you'll see it's been agreed upon. The parties agree. You see these different levels of a fight becoming official. And then you want to see like the final things kind of filled in. You want to see, okay, well, what is the actual date? So then we got March 25th. What is the location? Now we know that it's the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas. And let me see a flyer. Show me that you're serious. And now we've got our flyer. And it's kind of interesting. I thought that this one was going to be billed Caleb Plant versus David Benavidez. Now, they're both former champions. Caleb Plant is a former IBF champion who had 3 successful title defenses before losing to Canelo in the battle for Undisputed. And then David Benavidez, an undefeated former 2-time WBC champion, lost it the first time using recreational drugs or using drugs recreationally, and then the second time he lost it on the scale before his fight with Alexis Romer Angulo. So this is a 2-time former champ who has yet to lose a fight and never lost a belt in the ring. But I thought that one of the things that were going to be a requirement from the Caleb Plant side, I just thought that he was going to insist on top billing, like the A-side billing. That was just a guess of mine. I figured that David Benavidez seemed like the type to say whatever you want. Yeah, you want A-side billing, fine. You want 60 whatever percent of the purse, like, you know, the slightly lion's share of the purse, go ahead. I just want to fight you. That's kind of the energy that I've been getting from David Benavidez, regardless of who the opponent's name is, over the past couple of years. But it looks like this one is actually going to be David Benavidez versus Caleb Plant, for what it's worth. Again, they're both former champions. But I also read, and I don't know if it's official, but I read that they are going to be using a larger ring, which you would think favors the mover, Caleb Plant, in this case. So let me know if you've heard the same or if you've read the same, that they're going to be going with a larger ring. But man, we've been wanting this one for a while. I mean, yes, we do want to see Canelo eventually fight David Benavidez. We want to see David Benavidez fight a lot of good fighters. We want to see Jermall Charlo get in the mix if he could overcome whatever he's going through, according to Regis Prograis. I know that he had the back issue. I knew that he had like a legal issue that I thought was cleared up, but it looks like he's going through personal things. And it's been over a year and a half since the current middleweight WBC champion Jermall Charlo's gotten in the ring. But on the PBC side, they've got a lot of good fighters in that 160 to 168 range. They've got Carlos Adames, who's still at 160. And then at 168, we've obviously got David Benavidez, Caleb Plant, David Morrell Jr., who's really been looking sensational against, non-elite talent thus far, but, his opponent quality is growing and improving over time. But yeah, he seems to be moving along pretty quickly. But absent Canelo fighting one of these guys, David Benavidez versus Caleb Plant is kind of the one that we were really hoping to get. And now we've got it. Flyer and all. So, let me know what your early thoughts are here. I'm just thinking the odds will probably reflect that David Benavidez is probably going to win this one. It's really a tough call. David Benavidez via late stoppage, I get the impression that most people are going with, and I think that I'm even kind of leaning there, at least with my initial gut instinct. Now, I'm going to do a proper preview as we near the fight date, but a couple things that I want to consider is, I noticed Caleb Plant was using his right hand more against Anthony Durrell than he used it against, say, Caleb Truax, to where Caleb Plant for a while, or against Canelo, he wasn't letting his right hand go, and that might have been out of fear for Canelo's counter punches. But I was wondering, and I know that online boxing analyst Richard Dwyer has, suggested in the past that he has a hunch that Caleb Plant has been dealing with an injured right hand, which would explain the non-use in the last couple of fights, Anthony Durrell fight notwithstanding. But Caleb Plant has been pretty left-hand dominant in a lot of these recent fights, right? Heavy with the jab, or consistent with the jab. is able to dictate and determine range, control range very effectively. And then he's got a very mean left hook. I mean, I've seen him drop Uskata guy. I've seen him stop Mike Lee. Caleb Plant can pop. Like, he's not somebody who's a pitter-pat type of puncher. I mean, he gets a lot of stoppages. It's just that in comparison to David Benavidez just looks like the more destructive force between the two because of his overwhelming pressure style, intelligent pressure style. Like, I think David Benavidez is an underrated defensive fighter. But are we going to get a Caleb Plant versus Benavidez who is able and willing to use his right hand repeatedly? Or are we going to get somebody who is more or less seemingly on his bike, trying to use the whole ring, operate behind the jab, and trying to avoid longer exchanges? Because David Benavidez throws hard, he throws pretty quickly, and he throws in volume. And he's a big, tall guy. That's a pretty dangerous combination, especially when you consider David Benavidez's ability to kind of pull back and to avoid punches too. He doesn't have the greatest head movement, but he damn sure doesn't have the worst. He moves his head better than I would say better than a lot of fighters who have more of a sweet science reputation than David Benavidez. Again, underrated defensive fighter. But I feel like Caleb Plant is going to have to earn David Benavidez's respect, or else we'll get kind of very different styles, but you'll get what I'm saying. A Cotto versus Margarito 1, or we'll say Rashidi Ellis versus Roman Villa on that Gervonta Davis versus Hector Garcia undercard. Yeah, I think that if Caleb Plant is unable to hurt David Benavidez, at least stop him in his tracks, really give him something to think about, not only through mixing up the types of punches that you're throwing, but mixing up the cadence, putting certain hard punches and kind of hiding them in a combination. So if you let like 3 or 4 punches go, let the 3rd or 4th one be the hardest punch of the combination. Different things like that. I think that Caleb Plant is going to have to implement in order to gain Benavidez's respect and to basically keep the avalanche, the downpour of activity from just overwhelming you. Caleb Plant's got to really sting Benavidez, or worse. And like I said, he's got some pop, underrated power. So I'll say Caleb Plant has underrated power, whereas David Benavidez has underrated boxing ability and defense. But man, like, what is the dynamic going to look like? Because on paper, David Benavidez is listed as 6'1". David Benavidez, to my eyes, I saw him outside of it was Gervonta Davis versus Hugo Ruiz. David Benavidez was just kind of hanging outside the venue. He looks a good 6'3". Caleb Plant is listed at about the same height as Benavidez. I think that when we see them face off again, which we have in the past, you will see that there is a bit of a height dynamic. I'm expecting to see David Benavidez look about 2 inches taller than Caleb Plant. So I don't think it's going to be an eye-to-eye thing, because, I mean, that would make it that much more interesting if Caleb Plant is looking big around David Benavidez. But Caleb Plant is a physically strong fighter. I mean, look at his workout routines. Like, the guy's very physical. You might look at him as being kind of a tactician, which he is. He is a technician, but he's a physically strong guy. So I don't think that this is going to be something where David Benavidez is just able to impose himself physically over Caleb Plant. I think that we are not giving Caleb Plant enough respect in that regard. Granted, we did see Caleb Plant get stopped by Canelo Alvarez, but I feel like Canelo Alvarez, with his shorter height and the pressure style that he was employing, it's apples and oranges when you consider what Canelo does versus what David Benavidez does. Benavidez throws way more punches than Canelo. Canelo kind of loads up on certain punches, feints his way in, and is looking for 1 or 2 hard shots at a time as he's trying to corner you and trap you and cut the ring off and to keep on applying the mental pressure. I think that David Benavidez is going to be letting a lot more punches go, which is going to open him up to more counter-punching opportunities from Caleb Plant. But yeah, my early thoughts, I think Caleb Plant is going to have some early success. I think it's going to start swinging momentum-wise into David Benavidez's favor. And I think that Caleb Plant is going to be putting up a valiant effort. what if Caleb Plant drops David Benavidez in the first 4 rounds or is noticeably winning this could get very interesting. But I think that it's assuming that David Benavidez could take Caleb Plant's punch, which is an if, that is an if, I think David Benavidez is going to eventually catch up to Caleb Plant, walk him down a bit, and beat up on him, maybe resulting in a late stoppage. But those are just some of my early thoughts on this one. I'm going to do a proper preview in a few weeks, but please let me know what your early thoughts are on David Benavidez versus Caleb Plant. I'm just glad that they got it done. Again, this is going to happen on March 25th. It's going to be in Vegas. It's going to be on Showtime pay-per-view. And you know what? I was thinking, back in the days, would this have been a pay-per-view fight or would this have been a regular HBO and Showtime fight? I was asking, a couple relatives, my cousin, my brother, and my dad. I was asking them in the chat room, would this have been a pay-per-view back in the day? And I was saying, this would have probably been HBO or Showtime. But then my cousin brought up a good point. He said that back in the day, they might have been built up in a more mainstream way since boxing was bigger with the mainstream in prior decades, to where maybe they would have been able to build their name to pay-per-view levels. I mean, big if, I think, because pay-per-view used to just be relegated to, the Mike Tysons, the Oscar De La Hoyas, the Floyd Mayweathers, and so forth. It wasn't like a, Andy Ruiz versus Chris Arreola free-for-all, where majority of the, B+ fights are also going to be pay-per-view events. This one here, this isn't a B+ fight. This is at least an A- fight, probably an A level fight, especially with the intrigue that's been going on around David Benavidez. He's kind of been like the hot name, the boogeyman, if you will, where a lot of people think that he is, right now, he is the best in the division. And I think that a lot of people would take him to beat Canelo Alvarez. I'm thinking maybe slow down just a little bit, but yeah, I'm glad that Benavidez versus Plant's gonna go down. I can't wait to talk with y'all. I'm about to do the live chats again. We're gonna get more into this one, and I will drop a preview in the weeks ahead. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.